Grant, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining me for another interview. You know what? I
Good,
just
thank-
realized it's 1 year since I talked to you on the phone, May 30th last year, and it was the next day, Dolan made a video about the Wilson documents, and that's the first time we heard about it. So what a coincidence. I'm interviewing again today. How you
yeah,
doing, man?
good. Matt's my my PR guy, and my guy who does the book covers, and helps me out on a lot of the technical stuff. And I appreciate what you do for me, Matt. And yeah, it was a year ago. It was a big story. Desta was with me, I think, when I got the document. And there's actually two documents. Well, no, there's four documents that are involved to give you the background of it. So I'll give you the background of this Wilson document, which has now been sort of verified. It's exactly what I said it was. And last year, as soon as that document came out, there was people saying, now they hoaxed it, it's not real. And there was all sorts of people made radio shows, and they ran, one interview after another and said, this is all garbage, this is all, made up and stuff. And it's now been basically confirmed. We'll get into that in a minute, but to give you the background of the document. I'm in Laughlin, Nevada at the Paula Harris conference in Laughlin. And Desta's with me, and Desta gets contacted by a guy named James Rigney. Now Rigney gets this vision in the middle of the night. He's got these documents that he got from a friend of his in Australia who recovered them from Edgar Mitchell's files. Like the family didn't want the files. So this guy said, well, don't throw them out, I'll take them. So James Rigney sees these documents and he says, I got to get these things out. And he holds them for quite a while. I think he had them for a year or maybe more. So in the middle of this conference, in the middle of the night, he wakes up and he says, I got to give the document to Grant. He gets sort of a vision. So he contacts his wife back in Australia and he says, I need you to go and take these the document, the Wilson document, and I need you to fax it and I need you to send it to me right away. So then he gets up in the morning and he contacts Desta. So he goes to Desta and he says to Desta, I need a meeting with Grant. Now, if you know how the casino works, you don't have any internet connection on the main floor because they want you to gamble. They don't want you sitting on your cell phone. And I would normally be up in my hotel room, but I had gone down to take my bags to the other tower. The parkade was on the other tower. So I'm moving my bags across the casino. And it's the old story at a conference. If you've ever been to a conference, like you run into somebody, hi, goodbye, and talking, and the next person. Next thing I had like 5 people around me, and we're talking, and I haven't got across the casino yet. So I'm there for like an hour. I'm delayed. All these people talking to me. Jan Harson, the director of MUFON, comes by and says goodbye, and all these people and stuff, whatever. Meanwhile, Desta's trying to get a hold of me and saying, James wants a meeting. We're going for breakfast at 10 o'clock, and James has a meeting, and he wants to talk to you. He's got something he wants to show you. But of course, I'm not getting the message because we're Canadians, and you don't turn your cell phone on in the States. So I've got no cell phone connection. I've got no internet connection. I've got nothing. I don't know they want this meeting. And so then I finally get my bags, and 11 o'clock we're down in the lobby of the hotel. And Desta comes up and she says, where were you? I'm trying to get hold of you. James wanted a meeting or whatever. And I said, well, I was on the main floor. I had no connection. And anyway, so we're ready to go. Desta and I are heading to Tucson. Somebody had given us a big house to take care of there. So they want us there for dinner. So we got to take off. So it's 11 o'clock, and we're determined we got to leave at 11. We're not going to make it for dinner unless we leave for 11. It's a long drive to Tucson from Laughlin, Nevada. And so James Rigney from Australia comes up and he says, I need to show you something. And I said, well, I'm kind of busy, James. I'm heading out. I got to go to Tucson. We're out of here. And he said, well, no, this is pretty important. I need to show you something. I said, well, James, kind of busy. Why don't you? He said, I got a document. I said, why don't you just fax it? Send it to me. Email it to me, and I'll take a look at it. And he goes, no, I need 10 minutes of your time. I remember he said, I need 10 minutes of your time.
Because you get this from people all the time at conferences, right? People are coming
Yeah,
up to you.
yeah. And I didn't realize it would be that significant a document. So, and I really didn't know James all that well. I met him at conferences and stuff, but I really didn't know him. And as you said, I mean, you get all these people coming up with all sorts of documents that they think are important. So I said, okay. So then he has it on a little iPad. So he gives me the iPad, and then he goes wandering off. I don't know, he went to do something or whatever. And I'm looking at this document, and I see the document has now I'm going to forget his name. Oak Shannon. I see Oak Shannon on the front cover of this document, and I go, oh my God, because I know who Oak Shannon is.
Okay,
Nobody else knows who Oak Shannon is.
right. And why is Oak Shannon significant? Why did that pique your interest?
Because 20 years ago, Eric Davis gave me a set of notes from the UFO Working Group, 26, 27 pages, which Desta and I are going to put in a book called Alien Documents. These are the documents I was talking to you about yesterday. We got to make sure they're readable. So he gives me these documents and he says, they're Oak Shannon's notes, and you can't release them till Oak passes away. So I said, okay, fine. So I've held these documents for like 20 years, and they're handwritten documents, and they're inside the UFO Working Group that John Alexander had put out, and they had like Kit Green was the first meeting, Hal Puthoff was there, Ron Blackburn, all these guys with top secret SCI clearances. There's about 20 of them. And I remember when I had it, the rumor got around that I had them. I'd shown them at a conference. I just showed the first page that showed it was top secret restricted, which is the same classification as the Majestic 12 document, top secret restricted. So I put it on the screen just for half a second without Oak Shannon's name on there. And Tim Good, the famous researcher from Great Britain, comes, and George Wingfield comes up, and they say, can we, you showed the names of those people from that UFO Working Group. Can we get the names? And then I get home, and then Hal Puthoff contacts me, and Hal says, I understand you got a list of names of a group that I was supposedly part of. And I go, yeah, I do. I said, could I get them, please? So I sent him. I don't put Oak Shannon's name, and I leave one other name out, and I sent it to Hal. I never heard from him again. So basically confirmed that these were real. So Eric Davis gives me these notes from that are originally from Oak Shannon. So when I'm sitting in the Aquarius Hotel in the front lobby, and I look at this document on this little iPad, I see Oak Shannon's name, and I go, Oak Shannon. And then I see Eric Davis, his notes, and I go, oh, that two guys. I mean, this is the whole deal. He gave me the notes before, and I go, what the heck is going on here? And I start looking at this document, and it's like it has to do with the Wilson meeting. So the Wilson was an admiral. He was the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is the top intelligence guy in the United States of America. Now, in 1997. What happens is Will Miller, who's part of that document, you'll see a couple of pages of him talking in a letter in that what's called the Wilson leak document. He sets up a meeting with Stephen Greer and with Edgar Mitchell, and they go into the Wilson's office in the Pentagon, in the E-ring of the Pentagon, and Greer starts giving them the UFO briefing and all this kind of stuff. And Wilson saying, I haven't got access to this. This is garbage. I'm head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I should know what's going on here. And he's just getting angrier and angrier and angrier as this meeting goes on. And of course, when the meeting sort of became public, then it was like, Stephen Greer made it up. He's all garbage. It never happened or whatever. And so what happens is a few years later, Richard Dolan is shown 2 pages of the Wilson leak document. He's given 2 pages of the document, and it's a document where you can look at it, you can read it, but you can't copy it, you can't do whatever. And so he gets it, and that's part of the story. So he gets it, and he knows it's part of the Wilson leak, the Wilson meeting. And he had actually been involved. I was involved in '97 with Billy Cox from the Tampa Tribune. Greer was involved, and then Dolan got involved. So Dolan had seen this document. He had been shown 2 pages of the document, and then he realized this is for real. So he actually phones up Wilson, and he basically pretends he's doing a thing on Navy research or whatever, and then drops a UFO question on him. And then that's when Wilson says, nah, it's all poppycock. You know, they came in my office, there was nothing to it, it never happened the way they said, and just this total denial. So Dolan knows it's for real. Then I get this document in November of 2018, and I'm looking at this thing, and I don't know what to do, because I'm thinking, oh my God, I got to get a hold of this thing. And I'm thinking, is James going to give me this document? And I'm thinking, well, should I photocopy it with my cell phone? You know, go through and I didn't realize it was 15 pages. I thought it was only like 2 pages or 3 pages. So he comes back, and I say, I'm really interested in this. It's an important document. And I said, where the heck did you get this thing from? And he said, oh, it comes from Edgar Mitchell's files. And he basically tells me the fact that, you know, Mitchell's files were out there, and he managed to get these copies. And then I'm thinking, like, wow, this is a big story. So what happens is I'm doing Managing Magic 2, which Desta and I may put it out now. It was actually basically finished. We had done Managing Magic, and then we're going to do Managing Magic 2. And it was all basically done. And all we were going to do is insert these two documents. We're going to insert the Wilson document into the book with nothing. That's what I said to James. I said, James, I'll put him in the book, and I won't say nothing about him. I'll just put him in the book. I'll put the alien autopsy document in the book, and we'll just put it in the book. And somebody's going to read it. And somebody's going to say, "Do you see this document that's in this book? And what does it mean?" And that's how we were going to leak the story, because I know all the guys in the document. I know Eric Davis. I know all these people. And I was having a hard time dropping the document because these are people I know. So I figured that's the way I would do it. And then the document all got mixed up in, or the manuscript, Magic 2 got all mixed up in editing. And we lost all the footnotes in it. So that delayed it, which was good. And so I didn't know what to do with the document. And then I had two guys contact me. I had a guy contact me. And he only contacted me. He was in contact with me for a little while. He has not contacted me. He's disappeared since this happened. And he was a high-level guy who was connected with, indirectly with Tom DeLong, with Firmage and this sort of thing. And he contacts me, and he's asking just questions about stuff. And then I mentioned this document. So I figure what I'm going to do is, I can't leak the document, but what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to cover up anything. So I'll just talk about the document. So I was telling people, I talked to James Ian Dolly in December of the year before. I said, James, I got this document. And I describing the document. He said, can you give me a copy? I said, no, I can't give you a copy, which I should have done, but I didn't give him a copy. Then when we released the document, again, I have the manner to talk about it. And I talked to this guy, and he says, well, show me the document. So I sent him the document. And he says, well, why don't you just put this thing out? And I said, well, I really can't. I'm having a hard time. I'm not sleeping. I don't know if I can put this document out or whatever. And then he says, leave it with me. And then a couple of months later, this I think is in April, suddenly I get a phone call from him. He's in Chicago, and he's going up in elevators on business there. And he says, I think that document that you have just ended up on the internet. I go, oh, okay. And then that's the last I heard of him. So the document went on the internet, but it sat on the internet. The Wilson leaked document sat on the internet for months before anything anybody did with it.
So at what point did you know that it was sensitive and it was going to get you into trouble? Like it's a classified document.
No, the Eric, no, not that one. The John Alexander meeting, the UFO working group. Those notes were classified top secret restricted. What the Wilson leak is not classified at all. All it is Eric Davis's notes. So here's what happened. So Bob Bigelow is running NIDS, and he's got lots of money, and he spends tens of millions of dollars on UFOs, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. Sets up the consciousness research at University of Las Vegas, Nevada, spends $3.7 million. He starts up NIDS, and they're going to work on life after death and UFOs. And the one guy in the meeting says, life after death and UFOs? Why don't we just do Sasquatches and ESP? And they can't believe that these high-level scientists have been called in to do this. So they start working on this, and he brings in Kit Green, John Alexander's running the group, Combe Callagher, all these high-level guys. He can bring in anybody, and he's paying them a lot of money to come in to be consultants on this NIDS group. And he's just picking everybody's brain. He's finding the most powerful people that know pieces of the UFO story, and he's trying to pick their brains and trying to get all this stuff. So what the Wilson leak thing is, they have the 1997 meeting, and there's all these rumors that Wilson's been cut out of the loop. But Wilson's trying to figure out who's running the UFO program. So what they do is NIDS worked on a bunch of different programs. Everybody sees them as these evil Kabbalah guys. They weren't evil Kabbalah guys. It was just Bigelow trying to figure out what was going on. So they came to me, for example, about the Holloman Air Force Base film. I knew a lot about the Holloman Air Force Base film. They wanted to research. They wanted to work. Where's the film? Who's got the film? So they would go around and try to get that stuff. They did black triangles. They did cattle mutilations. And so what they do is they send Eric Davis to arrange a meeting with Wilson to look at this 1997 meeting. What did you find out? You got cut out and this sort of thing. And I'm not sure who it was, but it may have been Will Miller, because Will Miller was the advisor to Stephen Greer, who's the military advisor. So they may have gone to Will Miller, and Will Miller sets up this meeting with Admiral Wilson in 2001, and they're in Las Vegas. They're behind the EG&G building, and the EG&G is the contractors that run Area 51. So they're sitting in the back of the car, and Davis is asking him all these questions. What about this? What about that? How does the program work? And you got to remember, Eric Davis worked for NIDS. He was the chief science, the head scientist for NIDS with all these other guys. And he's the first guy to get laid off. That's when I met him back 20 years ago. He was getting laid off from NIDS, and I talked to him at that point. And so he's with Wilson, and what you see is Eric Davis's notes, and it's a memo to Bob Bigelow. So it's just a report to Bob Bigelow. The same as the alien autopsy document is them sitting there and saying, you know, that 1995 film about Santilli and the alien autopsy. I wonder if this is for real. And they call in all these people, and they Richard Doty I do an interview that we're going to release. Des is going to release this interview I do with Richard Doty last year. And Richard Doty says, oh, yeah, we had lots of meetings. We were in Houston at a meeting. We went to Kit Green's office, and we had this meeting about the alien autopsy. So NIDS guys were trying to figure out about the alien autopsy, and that the alien autopsy document is another report that goes to NIDS, to Bob Bigelow. So they probably got all these documents, and these two, the reason they came out is because Edgar Mitchell sat on the board of NIDS. So Edgar Mitchell's on the board, and so when he dies, his notes from NIDS are there. Now, if these guys had thought about it, they would have gone to Edgar Mitchell's funeral, and they would have gone to the family and said, he's got sensitive notes that have to do with our material. We'd like to get the notes, but they didn't do that. So the documents are there. The family doesn't want the documents, and the documents get out, and I end up getting a copy of the documents, and this guy with his friend in the Pentagon end up putting it on the internet, and the rest is history.
Wow. One interesting thing I heard was the interview with Eric Davis, New York Post, and he's talking about these documents, and the interviewer says, well, you know, we got these 15 pages by Grant Cameron. Who's Grant Cameron? And Eric Davis acknowledges that he knows you, but then he steps back and says he can't confirm or deny the validity of these documents, which I think is a pretty big thing. I mean, he even admits they're from Edgar Mitchell's files.
Yeah, and that's significant because that was always the claim, is that no, they're not from Edgar Mitchell's files. We hoaxed these documents, and we kept saying, we just kept quiet. We stayed in the background. There's no point in arguing with people who've got their minds made up. So we just stayed in the back. Dolan and I both made an agreement. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk to these people. We're not going to give them interviews. We're just going to sit in the background, and eventually this thing will unravel, which is exactly what happened. So he's you're talking about the interview with Eric Davis. Now he's being interviewed. This is already back last November. He's being interviewed by the New York Post. Now they interviewed me. Didn't do anything with any of the stuff I had, but they did a series of articles, and they got the Pentagon to admit, yeah, we're doing UFOs and this sort of thing. And so that guy does the interview with Eric Davis, and it's there where he says to Eric Davis, well, what about the Wilson document? And he said, I can't. He immediately looks into the camera and says, I can't talk about that. And that's the way you handle it, because what it's called is intelligence blowback. So if you've got a security clearance, or if you're inside a program and you say something and it gets out, you basically could lose your security clearance, you could lose your job. And so they all have to sit back, and the thing you do is exactly what Dole and I do, is you don't do anything. You just sit in the background and you don't say anything, because everything you say is just going to make it worse. So they say no comment, no comment. And Hal Puthoff said the same thing, no comment, no comment, until February of this year. Hal Puthoff makes a speech, and that's when he says, because Eric Davis was the chief scientist for Hal Puthoff's Institute for Advanced Studies. So he says, my chief scientist had a meeting with Admiral Wilson. So he confirms that part of the story, yes. And then Eric Davis says, yeah, they're from the Edgar Mitchell files, so what? And so they're confirming the basic core of the story that we told was that they're from the files. But in terms of talking about anything in detail in the document, they say no comment, because a part of it will be classified. Same as Melinda Leslie was in contact with Jim Semivan from To the Stars. So Jim Semivan, that's the only person he's talking to. And so she was asking him about it. She said, what about the Wilson leak? Did you guys discuss it at To the Stars? And he said, yeah, we discussed it. Well, what did you determine? I can't say. If there's one line that's classified in the document, I cannot comment on the document. So that they walk around it by not talking about it, because they're waiting for the intelligence blowback. Who's going to lose their job? What's going to happen? How do we cover this up? And the last thing you want to do is keep talking about it. So it's almost like the political system. You do it, you shut up, and you hope it'll go away. And eventually, everybody goes on to another story. Everybody goes back to telling the Nimitz story again, and everybody forgets about this document. And it has faded away into obscurity, except that now this document is now been talked about. And this New York Post guy is supposedly going to leak this comment with, and I've seen the film, I've seen it, but I'm not, there's some, they still have control of it, but he does confirm, yeah, this is from the Edgar Mitchell files, which basically confirms exactly the story that we were telling. And then you start looking at what does a document mean. And documents are very important because if you see at the end of the Wilson document, there's two things that are fairly significant. Is that Wilson says he couldn't get a briefing, but he does get a hold of one guy who did get a briefing. And I can't remember the guy's name. I really have not really read the Wilson document. I've glanced a little bit, but I haven't really read the document. But he says something was called the core story, that this high-level guy above Wilson says, we haven't back-engineered anything, and there are no abductions, which is a very controversial statement, which Kit Green had said in 2007 on a big board, on a big discussion board, no abductions. And I'm looking into that aspect, what they're talking about that. But it's this idea that they've got technology, and according to what Dolan was told, they've got at least one body. And that confirms the story that the alien autopsy, that they believe this story is for real. There was one. And so you have a situation where they may have hardware, they may have bodies, but they can't do anything with it. Like Eric Davis has been on record, I think he was on Coast to Coast, and said they shut down the program in 1989 because they couldn't get anywhere with it, that we don't have anything. So you see Eric Davis and guys like Jack Sarfati fighting about the mathematics. I know how this thing works. I know how to levitate this metal and how the tic tac flies. No, you don't. You're full of it, and they're fighting with each other. And you start to look at it. If they have this layered piece of metal and they can't levitate this little piece of metal, they haven't got anything. And that's sort of my conclusion now. But that was something that, if you remember the story back in the 1980s, Hal Puthoff, Kit Green from CIA, and Jacques Vallée get together in a Denny's restaurant, this famous core story. And they say the same thing. There's lots of garbage stories going around the UFO community. What do we know for sure? And what they come to is three things. Number one, we are being visited by some sort of intelligence. Number two, we've got crashed hardware. Number three, we've not been able to back engineer any of it.
So Eric Davis and Kit Green, these guys are two of the big players in this. And for those who are listening that don't know who they are, Eric Davis was on NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Sciences, at Skinwalker Ranch under Bigelow. And now there's rumors that he's part of the TTSA or an advisor of some sort. Is that true?
Well, he was an advisor. He pulled out, I think. I think he was going to run, he may still be. I think he was going to run the scientific programs for TTSA. But he's left Hal Puthoff. He's got a job with a aerospace company now. I'm not sure what his association with To the Stars, but he does back To the Stars, and that's what it comes down to. Is people got to remember with all these guys, because I first wrote about these guys in 1989, and nobody listened to anything I said. I mean, now everybody's come to Jesus on this whole thing about Kit Green and Hal Puthoff and Ron Pandolfi and all these guys and stuff. These guys have been around forever. I mean, and I knew about them because they were involved with Bill Moore in the 1980s, and I was involved with Bill Moore, so I knew who these guys were. I knew what the Avery name. They gave them all bird names. They called them the Avery. So there was the Penguin was John Alexander, and the Pelican was Ron Pandolfi, and everybody had a name. Kit Green was the Blue Jay, and Kit Green was actually brought in the 1980s to talk to Dr. Eric Walker at Penn State on a story that I worked on, and that's what Bill Moore said. I'm sending BJ in to talk to him, and BJ was Kit Green. So Kit Green has been around. He was the control officer for the remote viewing program when Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ ran the remote viewing program. The CIA guy was Kit Green, and he was the control officer. So he's been in this game, and probably between Kit Green and Hal Puthoff, they probably have the longest held top secret SCI clearances in the country. They've had them since like 1969 or 1970. They're big time guys. And Kit Green ran life sciences at the CIA. Then he went to General Motors and still does contract work. He's the guy that's working on the whole genetic thing with the MRIs and the genes of the experiencer people. He's running this program, which Jim Peniston says there's 8 people involved, and it's being financed, and it sounds like it's a defense program. So these guys have been around, and what happens is that all these guys are guys who've had experiences. So Eric Davis was an experiencer. He had this UFO sighting when he was graduating with his PhD. He had the UFO sighting. Jacques Vallée had a sighting in 1955. Gary Nolan had the little beings in his room when he was a little kid. Jim Semivan had the beings in his room when he was at the CIA. So all these guys are like you and I. You get down the rabbit hole and something happens, you see something, and you can't let it go. So everybody says, well, they're the evil cabal. No, they're just guys like you and I who have a little more ability to get answers than you and I. So Eric Davis worked as an intelligence officer when he was going to university. He was working for the Air Force, I think, in Korea, or just after he graduated. So these guys all have intelligence backgrounds, and what happens is when you're trying to figure it out. So if you're an intelligence guy and I'm a guy who's working in the military, and you and I get together and say, well, Matt, what do you know about this? And then we talk, because we both got security clearances, we can trust each other. And that's what these guys have been doing. They've just been talking with each other for many, many years. It was called bird chatter. They would be talking with each other and they'd putting stuff out and stuff like that. But they're basically just guys who go where the money is and go where the information is. So Bill Moore was the guy who was getting all the information from the government. So they all joined up with Bill Moore. They said, the government's talking to Bill Moore. Let's see what, and they all joined up. And then when Firmage came along, Firmage had lots of money. They all went to Firmage. And then when Firmage lost his money, they left Firmage. Now it's Tom DeLonge's the guy that's got all the contacts in the government. So they all go to Tom DeLonge because he's got the money. He's got the grants. He's got possibly patents. And he's the guy that the government is talking to. So they're just following the money and following the information, but basically they're guys who are trying to figure it out for themselves. My problem with the whole thing is, and why maybe they've had trouble with me, is what difference does it make? So you guys, like Jim Semivan said, there could be 50 people now, and it's now maybe called the Cosmic Club or something else. They got 50 people in this group, and they're all very secretive, and they're talking to each other. What good does that do to the world? I mean, so what? It's MJ, I call him MJ12 2.0. So what? You 12 more guys figure the thing out. I mean, how does that help anybody? You guys, and that's the whole deal, is they're never going to tell you either. The government's not going to tell you, and they're probably not going to tell you either, because they've got security clearances on the line, they've got patents on the line, they've got programs that they're working, and they're under security. So I admire what they're doing in terms of trying to move the information and get white world financing for what they're doing. But in a lot of ways, these guys are very, very secretive. And so they've had trouble with me that, I've said things that I shouldn't have said in the past that I heard.
Getting into trouble. I hope we don't get in trouble for this interview, Grant.